everyone. Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. And today, we've got a special guest, Jim Mayer, founder of the Manufacturing Connector, a consultancy helping small and mid-sized manufacturers tell their stories and celebrate their people. And if you are anywhere close to the manufacturing industry, you know this guy, and he's got a mind built for manufacturing and a heart right there too, built for people. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Greg. That was one of the nicest intros anybody's ever given me, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much, man. I'm not used to being on this side of intros, so that was really nice of you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Well, that was a little bit about you, but why don't you delve a little bit deeper? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and your company, and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, appreciate that. My journey is far from linear, right? I graduated high school, thought I was going to go be an anthropologist and get a degree from ASU. Anthropology takes a lot of school, and I didn't have the patience for school at 18 years old. And what do you do with an anthropology degree? Like I've always loved people, but what do you really do with an anthropology? I thought I was going to like go into the desert and dig up bones and stuff like that. And it's like less than 0.5% of anthropologists get that kind of a job. So I dropped out of school after one semester, and my dad had always thought that I should have gone to trade school, become a machinist, because that's what I loved in high school. Those were the classes that I excelled at. That's where I had passion and I had joy, and I enjoyed those classes. But I tried the university route. By the time I went back home, after a year here in Arizona, I went back to Colorado. Couldn't get into the program that I wanted to, so I bounced restaurant, retail jobs for a couple of years, got into construction, building custom log homes up in Northwest Colorado, in the Steamboat Springs area. Then one day I had fallen off one too many roofs and into snowbanks and just freezing and cold. And one of my distributors came to me and said, "Hey, why don't you come sell these supplies that you use every day?" And I said, "I'm not a salesman." And he said, "I've watched you bartend. You're a salesman. You know how to talk to people." And so I went to work for an industrial distribution company. And that's when I walked into my first machine shop in Long Beach, Wilmington, California, in the Long Beach Harbor. And I'll never not walk into machine shops. It was intoxicating. The sights, the smells, the sounds of that machine shop were just amazing. So I pivoted the distributor company that I was working on, or working for. We focused on mainly construction supplies, and we moved over to metalworking supplies, started calling more on manufacturers, and we grew that business a ton over the course of a couple of years. And finally, that company told me that they weren't going to move me into a corporate role because I was too valuable to them out in the field, which was my first like cultural mismatch, right? And so I left, and I went to work for OEM, selling factory automation type supplies, learning more about the manufacturing industry, and loved that, but didn't love the culture of the company I worked for. And there was very little work-life balance. And even though this was like 2008, work-life balance was still important to me at the time. So I went and left there, went to another distribution company, was there for a decade, worked various jobs, went then into the nonprofit sector, worked for the NTMA for a couple of years. I was the director of communications and business development for them, marketing, and left there and was going to start my own company when I got a call from a friend of mine saying, "Hey, I hear you're a free agent. I want you to come work for us. And I said, okay, sure, why not? So I went and worked for them for a couple of years, another OEM in the cutting tool and tool holder industry, and built out my company over the course of a couple of years while I worked for them. And left there when opportunities were misaligned again, and started my company full time in the spring of 22 as a culture consultant for manufacturers, which are two words that most manufacturers hate. So I wasn't very successful on my first iteration of my company. Now I've pivoted. I've finally started to listen to the market a little bit more, and what the market views as my skill sets that they want to utilize. And so now I go to trade shows. I help companies tell their story around three different content pillars. I help shops and manufacturers tell the story of their values, their mission, their vision, their culture internally. And I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life, and it's simultaneously the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. So that's the in a nutshell, less than 10-minute version of my story. I saw Wesley is on there. Hi, Wesley. He heard the full version at the AHTD fall conference a couple weeks ago. So thanks for being patient, Wesley, and hearing that again.
Well, thanks for joining us, Wesley. It's quite an interesting story, but I mean, anthropology, study of people and cultures, correct? I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yep.
sounds to me like you're putting your degree to work. I mean, like that doesn't happen too often. You're doing a lot where you're starting to tell the stories about companies and their people and their culture. Well, let me ask you this. Why, Jim? Why do manufacturers need to tell their story? And what were you listening to that you heard that changed what you were doing in terms of your manufacturing consulting work?
Yeah, good questions. To start off, manufacturers have to tell their story, and this is probably the longer of the two answers. Manufacturers have to tell their story because manufacturing was the backbone of the middle class from 1940 to 1980. We had the most robust middle class in the world, and we had prosperity, and we had and granted, I say that from a place of privilege, right? Not all classes, not all people in this country had those same opportunities to be middle class from 1940 to 1980, and I'm very aware of that. But when you look at the economics of the country and the actual middle class that we had, and what humans look at today as the ideal wealth distribution of wealth in the US, it follows the trend that we had from the 1940s to the 1980s. I think that I firmly believe that uh, we did a lot of things to ourselves in the 1980s as an industry, where we created bad PR moments, we created bad press. When we offshored jobs, we started closing schools, and we eliminated our workforce development pipeline, in essence, as well as contracted our capacity by offshoring these jobs. And so we created this PR nightmare of people not viewing manufacturing as a viable career path in this country. And in doing so, we made it more of a service related economy. Manufacturing never left completely, but we did offshore jobs. We did contract our capacity. We told high schoolers that manufacturing was for burnouts and losers, and that there was no future in the trades. And so I do what I do now because I believe in this industry. I think it's really cool what we're able to do as manufacturers to take a piece of raw material and make it into a component that goes under the ocean or into the sky or into space, um, or into the human body or into office furniture, whatever it is, right? I think it's amazing what we are able to accomplish as human beings through the manufacturing process. I also believe that manufacturing is the pathway to another robust middle class, but a middle class for everybody, right? And that's any gender, any race, any person who exists in the US who wants to live that middle class lifestyle has the opportunity through manufacturing. We have a lot of work that we have to do, but we have to tell the stories to get people into that career pathway. We have to take people who are young. We have to take people who are mid-career and disillusioned with the service economy life, who are disillusioned with the corporate ladder, and we need to embrace them and we need to show them a pathway here. So that's why I do what I do. I love this industry. I firmly believe that this industry is a way that we can make the economy what the people in this country want this economy to be, not necessarily special interests and corporations and politicians what they believe this country's economy should look like. So that's why I do what I do. Your second part to that question was, what did I hear? Am I remembering correct?
Correct.
All right. So uh, what I heard was, people don't want to be judged for their culture. And when I came into the market saying I was a culture consultant, they immediately thought that I was going to judge them. Right. And I'll be totally honest. I told this story on Chris Lukey's manufacturing happy hour. When I started my company, I thought I knew what a healthy culture was. Turns out I don't, because there's no one definition for everybody. Culture is as individualistic as you and I are, right? You and I are very similar in a lot of ways, but there are also things that make us uniquely us. And so, what is healthy to me may be absolutely toxic or minusculely toxic to you. It's a spectrum, right? It's not two defined points on on a line. It's a continuum of and a spectrum of toxicity and health when it comes to culture. So I learned that in the first year of owning my company, that and I learned it because I walked into a shop and I thought it was unbelievably toxic, like a horrible environment. I would never work there. And I did an engagement survey there, and they had one of the highest scores that I had ever seen, because their employees liked the toxicity. They the toxicity to me, right? It's not that it was toxic, because to them that was a great place to work, right? So I learned that in my first year. Uh, what I did, though, when I came into this industry, into my company, was and that's part of this, is I thought I knew what the industry wanted from me. And that was me to talk about culture, me to help fix companies' culture. And when I started my podcast, again, I wasn't listening, but I got really good at asking questions and having people talk about their culture, having people talk about their mission, their vision, their values, what they did to build the cultures intentionally that they wanted to have in their shops, in their facilities, in their factories. Still was not listening. Was not listening. At the start of this year, I actually, about a year ago now, I started on this journey of, okay, people don't like the consultant, Jim, because they don't want to be judged. Why don't I educate them? So I'll be education Jim. And I took I have 11 different workshops that I have created over the course of almost 4 years now. 1-day workshops all the way to like 3-day workshops. And I said, okay, I'm going to educate people. I'm going to take this knowledge that I have that I've put onto paper, and I'm going to educate them. And I worked with a variety of companies. I made a ton of phone calls. I said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this workshop in your city. Would you send people? Yes. Awesome. And I had filled verbally every slot that I was willing to offer in 18 different cities across the US. I was going to do 2 different workshops, one on leading change in digital transformation. So, how do you work on change management when it comes to digital transformation? And one was a 3-day intro to leadership. So, we historically take the best machinists and make them into a leader in our shops, right? Or the best welder or the best whatever quality person, and make them into leaders. We rarely give them the skill set to actually lead people. So, I said, okay, let's take a 101, a leadership 101 course on the road. So I had these 2 different workshops, 18 different cities, had it all planned out, had host locations. The first one I had in Cleveland, half the people that had told me they were going to come showed up. Shoot. All right. That's not great. I then had the next week, I had one of the 2 locations cancel on me. We can't host it here. Okay. Next location, I had about a third of the people show up. The fourth one, I showed up into St. Louis, and I had one company who had told me they were going to send 8 people, and they had signed up for 8 people. I landed Monday night. The workshop was Wednesday, and I landed at like 10 o'clock at night, and I had a cancellation notification for all 8 people.
This is
And
heartbreaking.
that was like 80%. I had 11 people registered, 8 of them just canceled. So I reached out to the other 3 and I said, hey, unfortunately, you're not going to get out of this what you have paid to, and I can't in good conscience charge you. So why don't I come visit your shop instead, and we can just talk? And I did that. And it was really hard. I full transparency for anybody listening, I got depressed, man. Like, that was a
Sure.
hard pill to swallow. That this thing that I built that I thought was that next pivot for my company, going from consultant to educator or facilitator, it wasn't working. And I had to stop that right there, and I canceled the rest of the tour.
So then take us into your pivot. What did you suddenly decide and that you should do since this wasn't working?
Yeah. And that's the irony. Again, not listening, right, to the market. I last year at IMTS, I had some time in between interviews for the Creators Lounge. And so I said, hey, I'm gonna buy a cheap gimbal off of Amazon and a cheap lav mic set, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to interview people. And I threw it out on LinkedIn, and like 10 people said, sure. I interviewed 10 people, more than 10 people said yes, but I interviewed 10 people, put them on my YouTube channel. And then I started getting people asking, when is my next show that I'm going to be at? Where are you going to be next? Can I go to this show? Can I go to that show? Still wasn't listening because I was so laser focused, man, on this workshop series that I wasn't listening. And it was about I was at Automate. I did 8 booth interviews in 24 hours. I was in Detroit for Automate for 24 hours. I landed at 5:30 in the morning of the first day. I left at 6:30 a.m. the next day, so 25 hours. But I did 8 booth interviews at Automate, and I was like, and they were paid interviews, right? Not a whole lot. 7 out of the 8 people paid me. And I said, holy smokes, that this could be a thing. And so I started talking to brands that I knew were exhibiting at other shows this fall, and Ended up with 6 booth interviews at FabTech that were paid. At West Tech last week, I had 7 interviews that were paid. Next week, I've got 2 at South Tech in Greenville, and I've got 4 in Chicago at the Assembly Rosemont show over the course of 3 days. So I'll be at 2 different shows next week. I've got Dallas, the MT Series Dallas, used to be called Hughes Tech. I've got 3 interviews there. I've got a company who's paying me to go to Japan for IREX and do an interview at their booth there. It was just that aha moment at Automate that this is what people were looking for. And along that way, I had a shop reach out. I'm sorry, go ahead. You wanted to ask a question there.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there because I think this is something really important here in that there's a lot of people who can interview you, and there's a lot of people who can pick up a video camera. But as you're telling me this story, I can't help but think of like Anthony Bourdain, who was a chef, spent a ton of time in the kitchen, and then went out to tell the story of different chefs in different restaurants. And I can't help but think there's a parallel here in that these people probably want to tell their story about what's great about their culture, and what culture is.
I
And
think you're
so
right.
you are stepping away from the judgment role and more into the the spotlight role. Is that somewhat accurate?
Yeah, and I think you're pretty spot on. I think that having somebody who can ask questions about what you're proud of makes all the difference in the world, right? When you've got, and that's why this industry has such diversity when it comes to the content that's created. Uh, you ask me questions that are different than any question that I would ask, right? Chris Lukey, Nikki Gonzalez, Megan, uh, Amy Seymour, right? We all have shows, um, but we all ask different questions because we're coming from a different place and where we are and what our lived experiences are to be able to ask questions that fit that narrative arc, right? And it's finding those people who want to tell their story through that narrative arc that resonates, right? And that's why your show, Rapid Fire, David Turner, I mean, he does a great job because he's doing the things that he knows and asking the questions that he knows. I mean, I heard a stat yesterday. There are 177 industrial podcasts out there right now.
Wow.
That's a lot. I haven't validated that, but somebody told me that they scraped the podcast networks and they found 177 that were manufacturing and industrial related podcasts. To me, that's bonkers, but there's a space for all of us, right? And because we're all coming from those different lived experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the impact that this content can have once you create it for the manufacturer. How does that build that pride, that long-term loyalty?
Yeah, great question. So just to fill in one little blank along the way here, I have had shops now reach out to me and say, "Hey, I've seen what you do at trade shows with OEMs and industrial service providers, software companies, whatnot. Can you do that for our shop?" And so I'm helping them create content that relates to their culture, to their mission, to their vision, to their values about their shop. They're using it for onboarding trainings, for ongoing trainings in their organization. The clips that I'm making for them, they're able to attach to their learning and development program or their ERP system. So instead of having a Word doc with their values. They can have, here's value one, and here's why value one exists and why it's important to us, etc. And that, having that ability to put that internally and externally for them really humanizes who they are. It takes that stigma of, well, this is the boss person, and boss person doesn't know what it's like to do X, Y, or Z, right? When you have these moments, these video clips like this, and you are able to make somebody feel immensely comfortable in being vulnerable and authentic in the way that they share whatever they're looking to share, that's extremely powerful content because you can use it again internally and externally.
So, Jim, is there a way people can track and see the results in this? How do you approach the? And I'm a marketing background, so I'm always getting called on the carpet like prove your value here. Is there some metrics that you focus on when you take this approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all depends on where they're being used, right? So internally, you would use it, or you would measure it by uh, engagement surveys. Is one way to measure that, right? When you have top level leadership talking about the organization in a way that is more transparent, it allows people to consume that content on their own. People then start to give discretionary effort. They start to see, oh, my boss really is walking the talk, or they really do, care for me. So you can use an engagement survey to measure that. If you don't go the route of engagement surveys, there are two levers that I always look at when I'm working with a company about their culture and employee engagement levels. And that is your productivity, right? Typically, I see a rise of about 26% in productivity when employee engagement is higher than whatever the baseline is. So whatever
Whoa.
your baseline is, you can get 26% more just by taking care of the low hanging fruit on an engagement survey, right?
Wow.
So if you see productivity go up, that's a sign that what you're doing is working. So for content, if you start to put that internal comms communication content out there, and you see a rise in productivity, that could be a correlated reason. The other one is turnover. I typically see a decrease of about 40% in the turnover rate with companies that I work with. So
Wow.
we're talking less cost in overhead, more revenue and productivity. So by putting content together that is used internally, and then highly suggest doing an engagement survey. It doesn't have to be me. There are a ton of other companies out there who do employee engagement surveys, but employee engagement surveys will give you the place that you can listen internally to what your employees want. And they will give you low hanging fruit on things that you can tackle to make the world of work better for them, which will then in turn provide you lower turnover, higher productivity, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So on the other side, when you're using these externally, right, there's all sorts of measures that you can look at. You can look at inbound leads. You can look at what kind of engine is this creating for your funnel, and your sales pipeline. I mean, I think that's a little bit more tangible than the cultural internal side.
What about recruiting?
100%, man. I I have a company that we did a series of videos, and they have started posting the videos on their recruiting outreach. So when they reach out to young people specifically, they are including an email about who they are, what they do, and why it'd be cool for this person to work for them, right? And it's a 60-second video, but it's super powerful. And they now have this pipeline of people that are waiting to come work for them. That's the kind of thing that content can bring to your, pardon me, to your arsenal that a lot of manufacturers just aren't using right now. And there's a ton of resources.
Well, I think you really honed in on the pain point and smart marketing on your part, Jim. We're almost at the top of the hour. Thank you
Has it
so much for
already been?
coming on the
Wow.
show.
That
Yeah,
was super quick, man.
that was super quick indeed. Well, we can always have you back, but if somebody wants to get a hold of you, if somebody wants to chat with you, learn more about what you're doing, how do they do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always the easiest way for people to get a hold of me. This is a LinkedIn Live, right? We're live on
That's right.
LinkedIn. All right, so right here on LinkedIn, go to my profile. I'm in a giant bathtub of orange ping pong balls. That's from IMTS 2018. I'll probably need to update that. Maybe next year at IMTS, I'll jump in that bathtub again if it's still around. You can always go to my website, themfgconnector.com, or call me, 480-532-2717. I mean, I call me, I text me, send me a smoke signal. I don't care. Just communicate somehow.
Operators are standing by. Thanks again, Jim. I appreciate it, and always great to chat with you.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it.